Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl. There's some really fun beers happening inside of a small Rhode Island brewery. This week, it's a conversation with Cheyne Tessier of Origin Beer Project about low ABV beers, art, and establishing a home base. First, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There, you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and other podcasts. Listen to shows like Brewer to Brewer and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. You can also follow All About Beer on Instagram, Threads, X, and Facebook at All About Beer. And to keep up with all of the smoked beer news and releases, make sure you check out This Week in Rauch Beer by searching the group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauch Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram. Glassware and apparel is available on allaboutbeer.com/merch. This show and all of the work we do, it's supported by you. Please go visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer. A few dollars goes a long way to help fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising and supporting All About Beer, please email us at info@allaboutbeer.com. Cheyne Tessier has a winding career in beer. Starting at Cape Cod Beer, he moved on to Proclamation Ale Works before joining Buttonwoods Brewery. It was there that he and his wife Erica started Origin Beer Project, an all-proprietorship brewery that focuses on low ABV beers and other drinkable delights. When the opportunity presented itself, they opened their own brewery location in a turnkey situation. Origin Beer Project is conveniently located across the street from another Providence gem, Moniker Brewing. Cheyne and Erica have made the space their own, with plants and hand-hewn woodwork, thoughtful art, small aesthetic touches that reveal themselves as the eye relaxes over time, and just stellar beer. Much of what Cheyne is brewing skews on the lower ABV side without sacrificing flavor. He talks about brewing out those recipes, embrace of hop water, and there's also the unmistakable art bent that adds to the overall experience. We cover it all and then some. But I'll say right at the start, when you get to Providence, don't overlook this gem of a brewery. Here's our conversation. You've had a career in beer long before you opened Origin. If you can go back in your mind a little bit, what was the first inkling that you had of what Origin would be? And are we sitting in it now?
So going back, I never thought or anticipated owning a brewery.
Okay.
Being asked as a home brewer, do you want to open up a brewery? It was always no. Like, I don't know what I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Just because I'm brewing 5-gallon batches does not mean I know everything about beer.
I always found that to be a silly question that people would ask. And I got that as a writer as well. Like, oh, you write about beer. Do you want to own a brewery? Absolutely not. Like, it's saying to me, like, oh, do you want to own a newspaper? It's like, no. You know, and I mean, now I do, but like, or I own a magazine. But yeah, it's never part of the plan.
Yeah, never.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get as much experience as possible wherever and whoever would accommodate. It's never easy trying to get a job in a brewery with zero experience. It's like trying to get a credit card. You don't have credit, but you need the credit card for credit.
Yeah.
So like, how do you eventually get in? Like, what is the path? So a lot of self-education. Getting into the idea of what Origin would be didn't start to happen until 2017, 2018, when I started thinking about it, when I felt like at that point in my career, it seemed like a possibility. And I knew it was going to be more than just a standard. Brewing just the standard, you know, up here in the Northeast being hazy IPA.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun riding that wave, especially early on, figuring it out.
Yeah.
But didn't want that to be the sole identity. It was more sort of revisiting the things that got me excited as a home brewer, maybe selfishly. Styles,
Okay.
balance, flavor.
Because in those early days of home brewing, I mean, I just know from talking with friends that there is that element of discovery, right? It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to make hop juice. Like, you want to understand what an ESB is. You want to understand what a quad is. You want to really sort of dive in and,
Totally. going a little further back, I didn't ever like beer
Okay.
growing up. It wasn't until Providence, Rhode Island, at a bar called the Wickenden Pub, where I discovered a Belgian Dark Strong,
Okay.
Nocturne. Blanking on the name right now. It became this.
Belgian Dark Strong. Who did that? Like Golden Drac had that for a while, and
Delirium.
Delirium. Okay.
Delirium.
Yeah.
So I was never a Tremens fan.
Okay.
Always darker beers, maltier beers.
Yeah.
So drinking that beer and just realizing the complexity of it, it was unlike any beer I've ever had. Also, just the bartender bringing it out, the foil neck. Like, what is this bottle? What is this thing?
The presentation, the theater of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That was when I realized that this is interesting, and how did this come to be? So sitting in that bar with a friend, we decided we were going to start homebrewing, and we did. He bought the first kit, went extract
Sure.
twice.
Yeah.
Tried talking to people about recipe development, and any of the shops I went to, they didn't want to talk. They just wanted to sell me a kit and change, an ingredient, or dry yeast to liquid yeast, or that's cool. But I really wanted to learn.
Yeah.
I want to know how and why, not just, okay, I made a product, let's drink it, whatever.
Yeah.
Getting into all grain brewing and finding a homebrew shop that would have a conversation was huge. I remember the first recipe I ever wrote was 90% crystal malt. Clearly I got laughed at. I didn't know why.
Yeah.
but again, I didn't know.
Sure. Yeah.
Didn't brew it, just
Right.
presented the recipe and no, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Quickly progressing into...
Although, experimentation can be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why didn't this ferment?
Right. Yeah.
It became a huge obsession, brewing almost every weekend, sometimes 2 beers a weekend, entering homebrew competitions. Early on, I was winning best of show in first place for this rye double IPA, so, West Coast style, the beers that were sort of prevalent at that time.
Yeah.
Black IPAs, which, again, liking a more malty beer.
Yeah.
Diving into even a buddy I was homebrewing with, we had planted 3 varieties of hops, built this whole system to string them up to harvest them. I think that yard is still going, and this was back in 2012, just sitting in his parents' yard at this point.
Nice.
Just the what, the why, and the how, consistently. Getting hands-on at a local brew pub in Willimantic, Connecticut. Willie Brew, Dave.
Yeah.
So he was the first to allow me to come in.
In the old post office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very cool. I brought him 2 of my home brews. He did not demolish them, which I was so nervous having someone professionally drink them.
Okay. Demolish as in critique.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I expected him just to be like,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
One was a pumpkin beer.
Okay.
And the other, I think, was that IPA. He had good things to say, which, made me feel a little bit better. And then from there, it was just reading more, going to American Brewers Guild for a weekend homebrewers class.
Yep.
That's where I met Joe Lemna from Burlington Beer.
Yeah.
I contributed to his Kickstarter to get a 1-week internship with him. So I spent a week OG Burlington. Small industry. It's where I met Alex Swanson, who was the head brewer, now the barrel manager at Finback.
Yeah.
Still very close with him. Just kind of kept progressing. Whoever would have me, whoever would have a legitimate conversation, which seemed to just keep happening, which I appreciated. And then getting up into an actual career in beer was another first at Cape Cod Beer.
Yeah.
Being able to come in as a home brewer, as a production assistant, and work my way up. Didn't think I would ever, within my first year, be on the brew deck, which wasn't a goal of mine. It wasn't, I need to be a brewer. I just wanted to be in the industry. I wanted to learn things that I didn't know. Not that I knew all that there was to know about brewing, but having an idea of what's going on based on homebrewing is cool. Having no idea what cellar work is like is another super important.
Yeah. I've been, so after Cape Cod, then you went to Proclamation. After Proclamation, you were at Buttonwoods.
Yeah, so Buttonwoods was supposed to be the stopgap into us opening up Origin.
Yeah.
So 2018, my wife Erica and I were talking a little more seriously about, let's do this.
So I want to jump back though, because when did you first, you had this great homebrewing background, you knew all these people, you're putting time into your education, into learning, into being a better brewer on a small scale. Then you make the jump, but you're saying you never wanted to open a place. You didn't want to, you weren't even thinking about being a brewer. Yeah. You just wanted all these things. So at what point during like your career was it, okay, maybe I should be thinking about this? Was there maybe not even an aha moment, but it's, I guess having been talking with you for the last hour or so here before we went on the air, and being in your place where everything seems very well thought out, you strike me as the guy, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, but you strike me as the type of guy who you'll do what you're asked in a brewing job, but are probably taking notes and saying, I don't like this, and if I had my own place, I would do it different, probably meaning better. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
I mean, I would assume most people would be sort of in that mindset.
Yeah.
I think it's...
But not everybody follows through.
Sure. And I think a lot of it is not being complacent and always thinking how to make something better and be more efficient at it. I love this industry. Doesn't mean I want to be here for 15 hours a day doing production work. If I know and I'm efficient at my job and I have a good product,
yeah,
that's where I feel the most accomplished, and not, oh, look at this beer that I brewed that we all enjoy. It's more, I brewed this beer efficiently with hopefully no flaws.
Okay.
And I was able to move on from that and make something else better.
Yeah.
Yada, yada.
Okay.
I think personally, so witnessing everything around me from all the places I had worked, compiling, filing, probably when I was at Proclamation, stepping up into the head brewer role, now you're seeing more, you're understanding more, you're understanding true cost, you're asking better questions, instead of, okay, we have this batch that we're brewing, what are we using for these ingredients? What do we want this beer to be? It's more, what does our in-package yield need to be to make sure that this batch is profitable? Once I know that, then I can work backwards and we can think better about how to produce this beer based on the turn time, the ingredients we're using, better extraction, like all of these things.
Yeah.
It's one thing to think forward, but I think thinking backwards creates a better experience and a better product, because you're thinking about it in someone's hand, you're thinking about the revenue that might be generated. I think as an assistant brewer, you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about your job, what you need to do, how to get it done. Becoming the head brewer is more scheduling, having meetings with ownership. What can we do? What can't we do? And why can or can't we do that?
Sure.
Right. And that's just a better way, I think, to go about that role or that business. And obviously, being the owner head brewer, now you're seeing everything. I'm literally touching everything.
Yeah.
We don't have a social media person. We don't have a designer. We don't have an assistant brewer. We're doing everything ourselves.
Does it remind you in some ways of those early homebrewing days?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, whether I'm actively thinking about it, it I definitely get those feelings, during the brew day, during knockout of what it was like with that pot on the stove and the immersion chiller, and
Yeah.
even coming in, I still to this day, no matter where I've brewed, going to sleep after a good brew day, it's like Christmas the next morning, coming back to make sure that everything you did is right, tasting that beer along the way, knowing the process, knowing what the yeast is doing, hearing the blow off going.
Yeah.
And then it's like a deep breath. Okay. And then you take your readings, like, okay, we're good. Like, that has never gotten old. It still happens.
I like that.
Maybe to a fault, part of wanting to own a brand is to overly romanticize those days in the industry.
Sure.
Like, it is a hard job. It's not always great, obviously. But taking 1 second to take a breath to actually see something versus just look at it, I think like those small things help foster creativity and make me feel better. And it's not just, I need to make money, I have to do this.
Sure.
It's experiencing a little bit more, trying to slow down in a crazy fast-paced industry.
Do you think you'd be here with this brewery if you didn't have that home brewing background? Because there's so many breweries out there these days, and people say, "Oh, I want to work at a brewery. I want to, get a job as a brewer." 10,000 breweries in the country. You can, probably find a break somewhere and just go from off the street into a brewery and start brewing fairly quickly.
I don't think I would. And like we were discussing earlier, mostly for the fact that growing up as a child, I watched a lot of Home Time, a lot of just construction shows, woodworking, right? And I was hell-bent on owning my own business. I knew from a young age I wanted to own my own business.
Okay.
What that was isn't what I thought it would be, but being a finished carpenter.
Yeah, I was
woodworking. That was, working with my hands was something that really intrigued me. Creating something from literally nothing. But then that changed when, graphic design, the internet, building websites, like doing all that kind of flooded in. Being quickly becoming a packaging geek, just the details that don't need to be like in a specific box or can or bottle, but just elevate it and draw you in.
Yeah.
It's marketing that for me feels silent, but if done right, it's extremely loud, which is, I think, akin to our labels and what we've done from the beginning, our specific packaging, trying to stand out in a crowded marketplace, especially how we started, when you're inside another place. How do you stand out? Why would you buy our beer during the pandemic when you can't try it?
Yeah.
Take this can home. I've never heard of this brewery. It's a hard sell unless you're in a community where people know who you are.
And in a state like Rhode Island, I think good news travels fast.
Correct. Yeah. For sure. I think having the background in Rhode Island is another benefit to us with this brand, for sure. People get to know you. Everybody wants to know the brewer, so it seems. I am definitely not an extrovert at all.
Okay.
My wife is more the extrovert. And I also believe that, my now wife, if she didn't have a background in this industry also, from this point looking backwards, I don't think this would be what it is or would have felt as easy as it has, even though it's incredibly stressful and difficult.
Yeah.
But having someone that is part of the industry and understands the industry makes it so much easier. Like, she understands what this is, and not just the day-to-day. She understands what it's like when you have an event, you're working all day, and then now you're out all night. Like, there's no awkward conversations. It's,
right.
Okay, it's timing, it's communication, we'll get through this, and then start over. It's no, again, another one.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, like we've never held each other back, maybe to a fault. When we used to, back in the day when, you know, hazy IPA wasn't everywhere and it wasn't cans, we go to a liquor store, it wouldn't be, okay, let's go. We've been here long enough. It's let's walk the aisles. Let's see what's new. Should I get this? I don't know. Yeah, you should totally get that. Okay. Like, we're bad at saying no to each other.
Okay.
We're good at, like, lifting each other up. Especially building this place out. Like, this wasn't easy.
I'll bet.
You know,
Yeah.
4 a.m. mornings to midnight, just building. For 2 months, I saw her sleeping, saying goodbye, and
Yeah.
then getting home for an hour or two, eating dinner and going to bed.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a real cost that can come with some of those things, but if you're both committed in the same way, you have to, I think.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, her major background was the opposite side, so front of house. You know, she worked in liquor stores, was a beer buyer, behind a bar, multiple distributors, big and small. Was most recently the business operations manager of a multi-state distributor. That's equally as stressful.
Oh yeah.
She's now out of the industry. I've only known her in the industry, but now she's working in commercial HVAC and she's crushing it, and she's lighter and she's happy, and the company she works for is great. So at least for us outside of these four walls, it's even more relaxing. You know, we're not all taking stress home from the industry.
Yeah.
Which is important.
All right, I want to jump back to when you were inside of Buttonwoods, because you brought it up with the alt proprietorship. So you had your brand inside Buttonwoods in the old location, in the Cranston location. They now have their tap room here in Providence, about a mile or so away. You and Morgan are still fairly tight and close, and good friends and everything. What did you learn about being a brewer and a business owner by having your own brand in somebody else's physical space?
So the one thing that I will say that I do miss about not being there is when you are in your own production facility and you're producing beer, and let's say you have these theories of, oh, if I change this or if I do that or that didn't go right, so it was obviously this thing. We were sharing the same brew house, same canning line. Our processes were completely different. We're using the same grain.
Yeah.
I was using different yeast, but our beers were completely different.
Yeah.
So having the conversation of what we thought maybe wasn't right or didn't go well, we could nix the stupid, oh, it was the mechanics, or it was this brew house, or it was this thing. The amount that I'll say we both learned in just brewing beer together, but with our own vision on how to produce that beer, you're never going to get that anywhere else.
Yeah.
We're literally sharing everything. Like, yeah, it's a collaborative industry, but being in the same four walls, not brewing each other's beer, but at least being there and having conversations and seeing things happen and how they turn out, we were able to progress our thoughts, our process, our beers much quicker than I brew this batch, once every 3 months. It's like, you're brewing this, I'm brewing that. I'm pulling, your lager yeast from your lager for my lager, but I'm producing a different type of lager with it. And it's like a completely different experience. So even like those small process tweaks, business-wise, it's honestly hard to say. Going into working with Morgan, it was supposed to be a year. It was we're gonna do this while we build out, or we start building out. We find a space. He needed help, so it was like a mutual thing.
Yeah.
The pandemic obviously just destroyed that, and we were there for, I think I was there for about 4 years.
Okay.
So my 1 year turned into 4 years, which also turned into discovering what alternating proprietorship breweries were. We were the first in the state to do that.
Yeah.
There's another one, Hive Beer. Same model, slightly different execution in southern Rhode Island. They brew inside of Gray Sail.
Okay.
They actually brew on Proclamation's original system,
Oh, fun.
which is now their pilot system.
Okay.
Um, being able to produce what we wanted to produce without the stress of overhead helped foster the idea of lower ABV beer being a thing and weird adjuncts being a thing. And not weird like, 30 boxes of puree in a 5-barrel
Yeah.
tank. It's more local ingredients, really delicately placed ingredients that sort of elevate the beer and not take away. It's not the focal point.
Yeah.
Our first beer was an oak fermented Czech pale lager at 3.5% called Small Victories.
Okay.
Reiterates us being small, being able to see our vision come to life. That beer was supposed to be 3%, and I got gun shy, so I moved it up to 3.5%, thinking closer to 4 would be better for the consumer.
Sure.
But also going into this brand and thinking business-wise, the idea was I'm doing everything the opposite of what I've seen. So I see everyone doing A, I'm going to do Z. It's been working out for us. Without having the stress of overhead, we could get people to understand that it was worth purchasing. It was worth drinking.
Yeah.
It was balanced. The plan is always, for me, anything sub 5%, even like our 2% beers, that they feel between 4 and 5%.
You want the body, you want the mouth. Yeah.
But not the sweetness. So they are fermented low.
Sure.
Attenuation is still really good, but more manipulating water chemistry, fermentation, yeast selection, whether that's, stressing because of temperature under pitching, temperature swings during fermentation. Nothing has ever been a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's been a lot of, all right, at X amount attenuation, I need to do this. At X amount attenuation, I need to do that.
Yeah.
Really nurturing, tasting, pushing. And by doing that, creating a product that stands out, at least I hope, from those actions. And then getting people to believe in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Being inside of Buttonwoods, they do focus on lagers, their wild program.
Their saisons. Yeah.
Saisons, yep.
Yeah.
And then also their hop forward beverages. We were never going to be someone who was competing in the double IPA category. Again, I think it's foolish. The state, we have a handful of good producers. I was doing that at Proclamation. If I was going to keep doing that, I would rather just continue to work for someone and collect a paycheck and
Sure.
have zero stress. So if we're doing this thing, we're doing it how we want. And if it's stressful and difficult, well, that's on us, and we're choosing to do that.
Sure.
It could be way easier, but if it's going to be easy is not owning your own business. Easy is being an employee for someone.
Yeah.
And that's just not what we wanted to do.
So some of those 3%, 2% beers, right? I'm sure there's a fun challenge, right? And I just as you were talking about water chemistry and yeast selection and that homebrewer mind, that tinkering kind of always looking for knowledge, really came out in that statement as you were saying that. But I also wonder, like, are these the type of beers that you like to drink, or is this something that you see the industry going towards and you're trying to fill that niche, or is it a combination of both?
So not at all would I have thought the industry would move in this direction.
Okay.
Which is very surprising to me. It was, in my mind, opening up, doing low ABV. Obviously, at the time, shock value was big, explosive flavor.
Sure.
Loud.
Yeah.
And in my mind, if I'm going to compete in that space, it's going to be the exact opposite, and that's going to be the new shock value. Like a 2% beer, a 3% beer, oak, a lager. Like, what is going on here? Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
To garner the attention. If we just threw out more hazy doubles and singles, people would obviously try them because of what they are.
Yeah.
But we might not see return consumers year one on that because they have the built-in, proclamation, long live Tilted Barns.
Right.
So why, especially during 2020, why try to do that?
Sure.
It didn't make any sense.
And there was something during 2020 and the beginning of the pandemic where I think consumers in the craft space went one of two ways. You either wanted those big boozy, we're all at home, we can have a beer at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon because who cares because the world's ending kind of thing. Yeah. And then we also went back to comfort beers as well. We saw, there's something nice about Sierra Pale or Bell's Two Hearted or, some of these ones that we all grew up with and just like a security blanket kind of thing. But then there was that shift afterwards where, and we were talking about non-alcs before we went on, of just, like, okay, maybe I overdid it, or, maybe I don't need to drink this much. And when I walk into a brewery and there's a tap list on the wall, I start with ABV, and I'm looking for 5% or less usually, just because I don't want to feel like crap the next day. And I feel like people are starting to catch up with that a little bit more. And, I mean, you're seeing it firsthand here.
Yeah, I mean, we as far as hops go, we focus on pale ale. For that fact that we still like hoppy beers. I'd like to drink more than one or two. And the same for my wife. You saw her when she walked in. Yeah. She doesn't want to be out after 1.5 doubles.
Right.
Like, that's not fun.
Right.
If we can produce a beer, it's obviously lacking alcohol sweetness that aids in the body, but if we can produce a 5% beer that has hop saturation, I'm perfectly happy with that. And I can drink a lot of them all day, or I can bounce between a 2% beer. Or coming into the lower ABV sector is something that I do want to drink. It's more, I've always enjoyed the communal aspect of food, beer, and people.
Yeah.
And I think that beer that pairs well with food is better than beer that doesn't.
Oh, sure.
As it should be.
Yeah.
So if we're producing styles that can accompany all of those situations, then I think we're also guaranteeing that we have better turnover on beers because they're not as fragile. There's less stress also. And then we're not playing the game of, I still do this, but a new beer all the time. We are consistently releasing new beers and like rebrews of old favorites, but it's within what we want to do because it's what I want to drink selfishly. So a lot of the portfolio is beers that we want to drink or just flavor combinations that sound interesting.
Yeah.
We haven't brewed a double IPA yet this year. Last year we brewed one.
Do you get people who walk in and say, "Where's your double?" Or like give me your strongest, give me your hazy. Where's your?
You can absolutely pick those people out as they walk in. And me and my wife will give each other the look, and then we'll wait. They walk through the doors. How's it going? How are you? They'll come up. I explain the menu. We have 3 menus. One is, draft beer. Second is all non-alc. Third is stuff to go.
Yeah.
They look at the menu for a second, look at me, and they say, "What's your haziest beer? What's your hoppiest beer? What's your best IPA?" We usually have one IPA on.
What's your best IPA?
So I say this one, and they're like, "Whoa." I was like, "Well, it's the only one we have."
Yeah.
It is hazy. I don't like.
Yeah.
Right now, I think we have 3 pails and 1 IPA.
Are those people who would come back, or are these people who are just in town for the weekend doing brewery crawls and looking around?
I feel like most of those the majority are traveling people.
Yeah.
There are local people that do come in often for hazy beers.
Sure.
Who might start with 1 or 2, but then they'll move on to something lower.
Sure.
They self-regulate, which is also great.
Yeah. Because there's something to be said to sticking to your guns, right? Because there was that time not too long ago in beer where, you have to have a hazy on. Like, if you don't have a hazy, you might as well not be a brewer because that's what everybody wants. And that frenzy that everybody got whipped up into, was in hindsight ridiculous because you don't need that. And I think of Todd DiMatteo down at Goodward in Georgia, where he's the same way. He doesn't have double IPAs on. He doesn't do hazies. And he says every once in a while somebody walks in and, they give him a hard time of, like, well, how come you don't have a hazy on? It's like, well, like, how often would you come in and buy it? And it's like, I don't know, like, once every 2 weeks when I'm in town. It's like, well, that's not enough to sell it. So, why don't you just have an English mild right now, and you can go get hazies everywhere else.
Right.
And it makes you stand out in a different way.
I think having a good, diverse selection helps bring more people in. I also think that, or I know for me, it's cool to do one thing over and over again, and theoretically you should be the best at that one thing.
Yeah.
But then you also lose skill in other areas if you're only thinking one direction. So by producing lower ABV beers up to, we do have a triple IPA.
Okay.
We usually brew it once a year. It's in a 12-ounce can because we're also not giving you 16 ounces of that. And we call it Everyone. Okay. Because we assume everybody wants it.
Yeah.
It sells good. Not as good as I thought it would.
Yeah.
We also produce a 5% smoked brown ale called To No One because we thought nobody would want it, and that sells really good.
Hurtful.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No,
it sells great. But just being like a little kitschy.
It's working. Yeah.
We would, funny story. Back in Cranston, we would have this one gentleman come in. Every time we produced it, we recognized him. He would pay in cash. He'd buy half a case. But he would always look at the menu as if he was going to buy something else, and I'd give it the 3 count in my head.
Right.
And he'd say, the brown ale. I'll take 12. I'm like,
yeah, you will. Yeah, you will.
So I appreciate those customers because they're coming for the thing that isn't, what theoretically is the most popular or should be.
Yeah.
And it lets me stretch my creativity, and I'm able to keep thinking, and I'm able to be nimble. Heaven forbid, the world shuts down again, which hopefully never does.
Yeah, hopefully.
But there's no the word pivot doesn't exist because we're just doing everything.
Yeah.
So like that's just what we do, and hopefully everything can be. I hope everything is decent. I hope everything is good. It's never going to be the best. There's always improvement. Yeah. It's always going to be.
And you have to be striving for that. Yeah.
Always learning and tinkering and.
When you make your triple IPA, right? Something just sort of scratched in the back of my brain a little bit on this, where if you are now known as the lower ABV brewery, or you're known for making things that are not everybody else's hazy IPA, when you make a triple IPA that you said sells okay, is there maybe this unconscious consumer bias where it's like, well, if they only do this once a year, it can't be all that good? Or, what does this low ABV brewer know about making double digit? It's sort of like when we saw some of the older legacy breweries try to get into the hop, and it just felt sad in some way. I remember when Anchor put out their hazy IPA before they closed, and it was just like, oh, buddy, please don't. Like, this is just embarrassing for all of us kind of thing. And there's this, conscious or unconscious bias of, well, that's your lane, and why are you not in that anymore?
Yeah. I mean, we do get ribbed, mostly by friends and regulars, whenever we have something that's 8% or higher.
Okay.
Like, whoa, what are you guys doing?
Everything all right at home? Yeah.
I thought you were a low ABV brewery. It's like, haha, yes, we are.
But you also don't want to be typecast that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just the challenge of producing sub 5% beer is what intrigues me.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of just, I don't know, thin, unbalanced, lower ABV beers that come off maybe watery. And part of that, I think, is what causes the difficulty in selling it in the market.
Yeah.
You have a consumer will try, we saw this with hops, a consumer will try a style, we'll say an IPA, and they have a bad example or a example that's too bitter. They come in, I don't like hops, I don't like IPAs. It's like, well, you should keep trying them at least until you find one you like. And if you truly don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the word, hoppy, that means so many things.
Yeah.
And it's
We
never
need
gonna
better
end.
descriptors. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Or we have better descriptors. We just need to be using them.
right.
Yeah.
We produce low 2.7 to 3.8% hoppy beers.
Okay.
And we don't use the word session because that's become something that means, it's not going to be good. It's going to be off balance. It's going to be
Right.
bitter. I know I don't like a session IPA, so we just call them tiny IPAs.
Okay.
It's been working. The first one that we produced, we packaged in 19.2 ounce stovepipes only. So it's either draft or stovepipe. No one was mad at that. We like, having fun a little bit.
Yeah.
Our 3.5% Czech lager that gets thrown into a stovepipe.
Okay.
That's sold out this year. People like low ABV in a big package.
Okay.
Doesn't
They also
ha-
like high ABV in a
right,
big package.
which
I mean,
is, I don't know why that's the trend. I don't really get that. even when I grab one, I don't drink it all.
No, that's. I see all the dads at the park walking around with their 10% juice forces. I'm like, it's 2:00 on a
Yeah,
Saturday
it's
afternoon. I'm
irresponsible.
going to be asleep in half an hour if I do that. Yeah. I like that though. Of just like sometimes you want a little bit more than a pint, and if it's a double IP or if it's a low ABV,
Yeah.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
nice. I want to just talk, not quickly, but about the art and the aesthetic of your cans. So you were talking earlier about how you and your wife would walk through the liquor stores and you'd be looking at packaging. And as we've been sitting here talking, I've been staring at your beverage cooler, and your labels really do stand out. They have a really nice color palette to them. You can read the text from a distance on a lot of them. They feel very welcoming in a way where a lot of stuff out there can be chaotic or overdone or even oversimplified for that. So I guess those trips to the liquor store paid off in you finding a way to make your beers stand out.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't completely my original idea. It is, art is always imitating art. So problems, going back to 2020, problem solving, number one was what the beers are going to be. Check, completely different than our host brewery and what's in the market.
Yeah.
Second is how do we get people into these beers if there's no one there to guide them, or it's on the shelf and no one's heard of us. The shelves are flooded. So labeling that is softer, I think, is louder, because right now everyone is so loud that loud can't compete with loud. So I still believe that if you're quiet enough, people will pay attention. They'll also calm down and they'll focus. Having label shapes that, though each brand or family of are different, looking at them at a distance, you can read them like, oh, that's an Origin beer. Like, I don't even know what that is, but I know that it's an Origin beer. So brand recognition based on just random shapes and a color palette.
Yeah.
I was inspired by Brewery West out in California.
Oh, yeah.
They do a lot of double wrapping.
Uh-huh.
And when I got my hands on one of those cans, it just blew me away how each separate individual element overlaid to create a canvas. I don't do that. I specifically have a 4x4 area that I design within. So it's inspired by them, but not a direct knockoff of what they do.
Yeah.
But I was just so into it, I just couldn't stop engaging with the label, and every beer was different, and I wanted to experience that label. For our anniversary, I do that. So above us, we can't see them right now, but our first, second, and third anniversary beers, it's like one of those candles for like a birthday, like a number 1, number 2, number 3.
Sure, yeah.
So that is the main element that double wraps the can. And when those elements come together, all of the texts align perfectly. So
like that.
it's basically a 16-inch label that wraps the can 2 times.
Yeah.
The labeling is annoying. It takes twice as long per can.
Sure.
But the effect is really cool, so we'll do it once a year for our anniversary.
Yeah.
That would be like the direct knockoff to what they're doing, but in a more simplified version.
Yeah. But I also like that commitment as well, and it shows...
No one else is going to do it. 'Cause being your own designer and understanding how the specific labeler works, half the time I'm designing the label to work with the labeler. I'm not just designing a label for the can. I need to think about, I don't have a template. I'm creating a template every single time. I'm not just plugging and playing. I'm designing from scratch. Whether it's a single panel that's cut out like this can, or if it's 3, 4, 5, 6 different elements that play with each other.
Yeah. I like the die cut stickers that are going on here as well. You were pointing out a can of spare parts, your hop water that on the table.
Yeah.
For those who can't see what we're doing right now. But I like it's thoughtful, and it's what it makes me feel happy when I'm.
It just art invokes feeling. I hope that this space invokes a feeling also. Coming into it, it should feel fresh. It should make you want to hang out longer than you think you're going to.
Yeah.
It's small. There aren't a lot of seats, but it forces people to get to know each other. It becomes a very communal space. When we have friends and regulars who are taking up multiple tables and new people come in, we can tell them to get the hell out of the way and make room, and they gladly do that to welcome someone else in.
Sure.
And that just goes back to, beer being a communal thing. The thing that I liked about drinking and eating with a group of people. The beer, I don't want it to ever be the focal point. It should be the attachment to the experience. It should never detract, If you're drinking it and you're thinking about it too much, maybe that's not a good thing.
Sure.
It should also not be a chore.
Also that.
It should be gone before you realize.
Yeah.
Or you're going in for that third sip from the first pour, and you're just like, there's an indescribable thing. At the end of the day, everything that I think about, from brew to fermentation, packaging, doesn't matter if your experience isn't good.
Yeah.
So sometimes I try to pick up one of our beers and just drink it and experience it how someone else would that doesn't know anything about it. It's a yes or no question. Is it good or is it bad? Do I like it? Do I not like it? I don't care what I did to it. I don't care what I used.
Yeah.
It's yes or no. There's no gray area, at least in a craft brewery. You can go to a dive bar and you can be like, yeah, it was fine.
Right.
Maybe I'll have another one because it was cheap enough.
Right.
But you're not going to consistently drink a beer that you don't like. At least I hope not.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
There's no accounting for taste. All right, before I let you go, because I know you're in the middle of, obviously working. It's your work day, and I want to ask you.
Don't tell the boss I'm doing this.
I want to ask you the green door question, and the premise is on the TV show The Good Place. In the final season, they introduced this concept of a green door, and the characters can walk through it and be anywhere they want, doing whatever they want to be doing. So if we had a green door on our plane of existence, and you could walk through it when this conversation ends and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you like to go? Who would you like to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
So I've definitely thought about this.
Okay.
It would definitely be with my late grandmother.
Okay.
She fostered so much creativity in me. She actually wanted me to be a piano player. Apparently I have fingers for a piano.
Okay.
I don't know. She taught me how to sew. She, bought me more Legos than I needed to have. She was an amazing woman. She lived in Westerly, Rhode Island, so it would probably be at whatever pub was near where she lived, just because I grew up in Westerly, like Summers, Misquamicut.
Yeah.
Digging holes in the beach that I probably shouldn't have been at a young age,
Okay, yeah.
And honestly, it would be one of our beers to show her something that I've created. That specific beer, I don't know what she would have consumed, but probably Small Victories.
Okay.
That was our baby, was the first beer. Probably share that with her.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's
Yeah.
really nice. thanks for opening up the brewery. Thanks for sitting down and talking. And it's really cool to be in this space and to be having this conversation with you. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah. Next week, it's a Chicago-centric episode you won't want to miss, but your taste buds hope you will. Josh Noel is here to talk about his new book about Malort. Questions, comments, guest suggestions, you can do all of that by emailing me. It's John Holl, that's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. A reminder, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and read great new content, as well as the archives going back to 1979. You can also follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And don't forget to check out probrewer.com each week for original articles from the All About Beer team. As for this show, Nate Weber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.